So, Prano, welcome to Strasbourg.
Thank you.
You come with your, I think, your first feature film, which is called Censor. Censorship is, of course, one of the topics of the movie. What brought you to this video nasties topic? Is it an historical interest?
Yeah, I actually started with the idea of a censor. So the censor came before the period for me, and it was when I was reading this article about the Hammer horror era, and I know your festival is interested in Hammer. I was reading this article and there was a comment about how during the Hammer era, censors had not many rules, but one rule was that they would always cut the sight of blood on the breast of a woman because they believed it would make men likely to commit rape. And I thought that's a very specific idea, and I thought there were probably quite a lot of men, you know, as censors. So what is it that protects the censor from losing control if these violent images are supposed to have a violent effect on our behaviour? And so I kind of started there, and I became really interested in the idea of telling a story about a film censor, and perhaps a film censor who was having a complicated time with their own moral compass. Maybe that they started to think deep down that they were a bad person. And so from there I started to look into the history of censorship through the UK, and it's fascinating all the way back to the beginning of censorship, but the video nasty era, the 80s in the UK, was especially fascinating because the reaction to VHS and VHS horror was quite hysterical in the UK. So there was a boom in low-budget horror films that became available when VHS happened. And now these films were available to go direct to the home. And there was a lot of fear around what these films were going to do to people, do to children. Were they going to spawn the next generation of murderers and psychopaths? And the UK reaction in the tabloids and the government was crazy, basically. So I felt like this period really echoed what I wanted to explore in the character, which is this kind of strange conversation between what's on screen and society or the individual. So it felt like a really rich period to set the film.
And that brings us to a great idea in the film, is that censorship is people telling you what you can see because of how you're going to react to it. And what you are telling us is that what your character sees in the movie depends on our own trauma. So she brings the experience. The art is in the eye of the one who sees.
Yeah, I think we all bring our own individual perspective to a film, you know. When we watch things, we all see things because maybe we're feeling a certain way that day, or something happened yesterday that might make us experience certain films in different ways. But I was much more interested with Enid, rather than exploring the idea of the film being the thing that triggers her. It is a repressed trauma that she has been concealing and censoring within herself for almost her entire life, and has structured her personality, her behaviour, and off the back of that, exploring the idea of hysteria and the way our imaginations can provoke our behaviour in perhaps not always the most positive ways, because again, it was a hysterical reaction to the video nasties at the time. So you're trying to manifest the period in the character in a way.
That censor character, Enid, in the first draft of the screenplay, it's always been a woman, because I think it makes it a lot stronger.
It was actually a man to begin with, yeah. So there was a male character in my mind at first because of the comment in that article about the blood on the breast, and I had this whole idea about a man who was going on a date with a woman and she spills cherry jam down her top, and he starts to have these confusing feelings and worry about himself. So it started off as a male character, and it was quite silly in a way as an idea, just the initial ping. And then the more I thought about it, the more I felt that the tension of watching a woman watch these films, to me, was much more interesting than a man, and much less obvious, because we don't see as much on screen about women's relationship with horror, and also women's relationships with their own shadow self. You know, we often see women in horror who are the victim of, you know, something going on outside rather than dealing with their own internal demons. And so for me, that felt really interesting. And also when you're looking at themes of responsibility and blame, I think, well, I'm not a man, so I can't speak for men, but I think women tend to shoulder a lot of responsibility and blame themselves and beat themselves up about things. So it felt like those were reasons to make it a woman, but also for me as a female filmmaker, even though I co-wrote the script with a man, I wanted to explore through the film a little bit of my own relationship with horror, and so it felt like I could perhaps do that more clearly in my mind if it was a female character.
Yeah. You were talking about your relationship to horror movies. I think the art direction is amazing, and the light is just astonishing. And the light in the movie brings us right away to some movie classics of the 80s, horror classics of the 80s. Did you talk about some precise titles with your DOP back then?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we were... well, when I was researching the film, I was obviously revisiting a lot of the video nasties, and one director in particular who I love the visual style of is Lucio Fulci, and his films were certainly things I was showing my DP, but those films were more inspiring for the film Asunder that she watches, where she sees Alice Lee for the first time, and also for the latter part of the film. There's another sequence that Enid watches called Don't Go in the Church, and for that I wanted to create something that was maybe slightly more eerie and haunting and perhaps a little bit more grounded in realism. So I was looking at films like The Blood on Satan's Claw and Axe, so more 70s kind of eerie horror. But there were very specific references that we kind of pulled out for each film within the film. And then you can kind of go a bit more crazy towards the end of the film, and you've got a little bit of The Evil Dead and a little bit of Suspiria. And again, Argento for the dream sequences, you know, those kind of really bold and vibrant colours. The colour journey in the film was also something that we really had to think about with the cinematography, because I wanted to create a very kind of bleak 80s Britain world at the front of the film that felt like Thatcher's Britain. It's oppressive, it's not this kind of pop 80s vision, it's something much more heavy. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you're moving towards films like Suspiria and, you know, House by the Cemetery, and things that are much more kind of vibrant and lurid. And so me and my DOP really thought about how we would weave that journey visually. So the colour journey in the film is slowly woven through and kind of almost represents Enid's slow descent, you know, her psychological descent. So things like the dreams and being very Suspiria and Argento inspired in that moment, we take some of those colours then back into Enid's reality. So you're kind of slowly weaving the colours through the worlds, and that echoes into the production design and the costume as well. So you have the characters at the front of the film who are very, they very much like fit the world of the film in terms of their costume and the colours that they're wearing. They feel like part of the furniture in the censor's office. And then as the film progresses, we start to see them wearing reds and oranges, and Enid's neckline even sort of breaks down and becomes looser. And so all of those things were kind of inspired in a way by the colours of the two worlds that I wanted to explore in the film, and how we kind of merged those two worlds together. So that was a lot of fun actually to design,
I guess. So those are very conscious references, and you were telling me that in a way, and you were inspired by David Lynch, but on an unconscious way, on a conscious level.
Yeah, I'm a massive Lynch fan. Basically, I grew up watching Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet and Eraserhead, and he is an inspiration to me. Or when I was a teenager, I think watching his films made me think about film in a different way. It made me think about how film could be expressionistic, and perhaps you can kind of bend the rules within the normal structure of a film. And I found that really exciting. So I've always been a huge fan of Lynch, and I've had people ask me if Twin Peaks is a reference, but I never consciously thought about Twin Peaks. But certainly Blue Velvet. I think Blue Velvet's, you know, it's one of my favourite films of all time, and I find it constantly inspiring, you know, to go back and rewatch that film. But certainly there were moments of Blue Velvet and Lost Highway as well that I was referencing for specific scenes. So yeah, he was a big influence. And then I guess I was always also looking at films like The Player, which is another great meta film, and for the kind of psychological descent, films like Let's Scare Jessica to Death and Black Swan were also films I made Niamh Algar, my lead actress, watch.
Okay, okay. The lead actress who plays Enid, she's amazing in the movie, but she's amazing in a movie in a weird way, because you ask her not to be obvious. She's kind of, you know, blah, and she becomes more and more powerful and interesting as she goes right into her trauma. Yeah,
yeah. She was always a coiled spring at the front of the film, and I wanted the film not to just be about censorship in film and art, but also how we censor ourselves, because we all censor aspects of ourselves. You know, it's something that people do in order to fit into certain situations. There are elements of ourselves that we feel more or less comfortable with, and Enid is someone who feels very uncomfortable with who she is, or who she thinks she is deep down. So I described Enid to Niamh as an onion, that she's in the middle, she thinks it's rotten, that very middle piece, and she's created all these layers around herself to kind of disguise that rotten, bad element of herself. And so that is what she is at the beginning of the film, and we wanted to reflect that in the way she looks, the way she's very done up, the way she sits, her posture, and then we have somewhere to unravel from. And so, you know, even in the hair, she's, you know, probably a bit like my hair, you know, it's very up, neat and tidy at the beginning, and then as she unravels it, eventually it all falls down, like when we kind of end up in that sort of final psychological descent. So it was a fun thing to write, and then to bring Niamh into that process was amazing. And we spoke a lot before we shot the film about the physicality, and about her backstory and why she's become a censor, and how that reflects her need to protect. And yeah, Niamh was a really incredible collaborator, and brought some really great ideas as well to the plate, like some of the physicalities, like her nervous tic, her picking at her fingernail, and things that were things that Niamh suggested, and then I'd write them into the script. And also the glasses, that became a big prop for her, that she felt was something that, you know, she needed something in between herself and what she's watching. And there's a very specific moment in the film where she takes her glasses off, and what she sees after that point is something that's really, you know, hitting her, because up until that point she can, you know, she's got a wall, so she's not being affected by things, whereas her colleagues might be being more affected. She's protecting herself, I guess. So yeah, it was a really fun experience, because it wasn't just me and Niamh who were so obsessed with the character, but it was every head of department. You know, we were all just so focused on her and her journey.
I guess the promotion of the movie wasn't easy in those COVID times, but still, we talked about it last night. The movie was selected in Berlin, in the Panorama section, which I think is a big achievement, because they don't select many straight horror movies, and especially some that are that graphic.
Yeah, I mean, the journey of the film has been certainly unique and amazing. We started in Sundance in January, and then we went to Berlin, and unfortunately I wasn't able to go to either of the festivals, but Berlin and some of the other festivals that we've played at have been really, I think it really exciting to have horror films breaking into those sort of areas of not just festivals, but, you know, you're seeing things like Titane winning the Palme d'Or, and I think people are starting to see horror differently in the last few years, that it's perhaps just breaking through in a different way and being taken perhaps a little bit more seriously in the right way. We don't want to be taken too seriously. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey, and it's amazing to be here because this is the first festival I've been able to travel to. So yeah, it's wonderful to actually finally be at a real physical festival with the film.
And it's wonderful for us and for the audience. Thanks a lot for your answers.
Thank you.